Welcome to Dwarf Fortress with Teemo. Today I'm going over a little tutorial about looking at the world map before you embark. There's a lot of information here, and I just want to give people new to the game a little bit more info about what you're looking at. So I've created a world here, and we're going to take a look at the mechanics of it and everything that is important to you. So if you look at a world, at the top we've got some ice and snow up here. It's really cold. All the way down at the bottom, ice and snow again. So I've got a couple of north and south pole you can look at if you think about it. As you get towards the middle, it gets warmer and hotter. You can see here we've got some warm, and I think there was some hot area I found earlier. But that's kind of the way the world works. It's cold on the north and south. It gets hot in the middle. You can see here some hot stuff. And not every world has poles on both. Sometimes you can get just cold on one side, and it gets it's almost like it's a half world. So you might see that. But the temperature matters because it's telling you how often the water on your map is going to freeze. So a hot map is never going to have frozen water. That water is going to be running all the time. A freezing map up here is going to have the water frozen all the time. That means that you can actually build with the ice blocks if you want, and it'll just stay ice blocks. And then there's cold, there's temperate, there's warm. That are the three categories in between. And even within those groups, there might be a little variance between two warm sites, but not too much variance. So you want to try to pick something that's right for how much you want the water to freeze on your map. And also, even if you pick a site that's, say, temperate, you might not get water to freeze every winter. So there is some variance in the seasons. All right, so that's kind of the first thing up at the top right is the temperature you're looking at. The next thing as you're going around the map is trees. So you can see trees very easily on the map. But even in places that there aren't trees, you can see here my mouse is over what looks like hills, but the tree says woodland. You can see, let me show you if I can find some of the sparse trees. So yeah, so here's some sparse trees. You know, it's a very similar, my mouse right here says sparse trees. I go down just a little bit and it says woodland, but it looks the same on the map. So even if you have parts of the map that look the same, the amount of trees that can be there can be a little bit different. Now the reason why trees are important is that there's two main resources that you build all your stuff out of: rock and trees. There are some things that can only be built out of one or the other. For instance, beds for your dwarves can only be made out of wood. And if you don't have trees on the surface when you embark, you either got to bring some trees with you, or you got to dig down to the caverns right away to go after the mushrooms, which can also count as lumber for trees. So you kind of have two choices there. Or you're going to have to wait to trade for trees, but then you're at the mercy of merchants to actually bring you trees the whole time. All right, the next thing down is other vegetation. So other vegetation are ground, bushes, and the like that can give sources of food and supplies. So if you go somewhere that has none, for instance right here on this mountain, you've got a mountain peak, other vegetation is none, that's going to limit your food choices, easy food choices right at the start. So it's helpful, and again you saw that I think just a little bit right over here we have thick vegetation. It's still on a mountain, but I have thick vegetation here and no vegetation here. This is just going to be an easier site to start. And then the surroundings, here we got wilderness, we got calm, we got untamed wilds. Untamed wilds is kind of the most vicious you can get for surroundings for the wildlife. Wilderness is a bit easier, calm is very easy, and I believe, yeah, there's this serene, which is actually like good for you. So what you have for your surroundings kind of depends how much the wildlife is going to be attacking you on the outside. Below that you see here it says brook, cult flyer. That's just the name of the brook. But this tells you other things that are just in the area. Kind of the difference up at those top 5 lines and then you see all the minerals and stuff, and the light aquifer, the deep soil. So you're always going to have those two blocks, but you might not have stuff in between those two blocks because there might not be something nearby. But if there is something nearby, and even if there's multiple things nearby, it'll tell you that. For instance, this has both the dark goblin pits and it has a stream nearby. And it's just giving you a little bit of information about what is there. Now, for example, you could be pretty near to something even if it doesn't show up. So this right here, see this brown color with a tower kind of in the middle of it. So this would be a necromancer's tower. And if you build your civilization, say right here, that's really close to the tower, you'll probably get waves of undead being this close to this tower, but it doesn't show up anywhere telling you that there's a necromancer's tower nearby. Just if you see one of these brown with a little tower in the middle, you should be far away from that unless you want to deal with the undead attacking you. And you can also see the surroundings here are haunted. So if you were to actually just play inside of this, with that haunted surrounding, you're going to be seeing stuff like death fogs rolling through. You could have the you just kill some animals, and the animal bodies themselves could come back to life. It's a tough surrounding to play in. If you get really good at the game, feel free to start here, but it is going to be a challenge. You need to embark with basically 6 warriors at a minimum, and try to survive that. It is fun, but it's tough. You can see that there's a lot of buildings, civilizations. The dwarves always live in the mountains. The humans always live out here away from mountains and away from the forests. And the little elven civilizations are living in the forests. At the very bottom of the top right block, you can see humans, elves, and goblins, and how far away they are, which direction, and if you're hostile or not. So that's good to look at, because if you, like right here, I just have elves and goblins, which means I'm not going to get humans to come trade with me. There are unique items that come from elves, goblins, and dwarves. I believe the dwarven civilization, the dwarven civilization is going to trade with you no matter where you go, because it's going to be a civilization that you come from, and you can actually choose your origin civilization. So there's different dwarven groups, and so depending where you are on the map, you want to pick a dwarven settlement that is near you, most likely. You could pick this one here at the north and then go all the way south. It just makes it a little bit easier if the dwarves are closer to you. So that's fine. So that's a little, I'll go talk about this middle block. So there's things to look at. So if you see clay, there are certain things that can only be made with clay. So if you want to make some of those things, like pots and stuff that can be made with clay, you're going to want the clay there. Sand is what you need for making glass. So if you want to be making glass products, you're going to want some sand. Otherwise, you're going to have to trade for those things. And finally, the soil is nice to have. And you could see deep soil, very deep soil. That just tells you where in the embark the soil is going to be. Soil is used to farm usually underground plants. And that's helpful for when you embark with your plump helmets, your sweet pods, your cave wheat, that kind of stuff for making food. You're going to want some soil, or you're going to have to irrigate. So if you embark somewhere that doesn't have an aquifer, doesn't have a river, doesn't have soil, it's going to be a tough embark to get farming up and going. An aquifer, there's a lot of complaints about aquifers. So I want to try to dispel some for you. The light aquifer, which is virtually everywhere that is an aquifer, is a light one, is really easy to deal with. Don't get scared off by a light aquifer. The heavy aquifer is rough to deal with. So this site has a heavy aquifer, so that the water comes out of the ground so fast that you're going to need to actually build a pump to pump the water out in order to actually do anything with it. So that's tough to start with that. You give yourself a challenge by starting with a heavy aquifer later once you get good. I don't recommend it at the start. but you don't have to get scared off by a light aquifer. What you're going to do to deal with a light aquifer is just kind of dig a little bit slower. Don't just designate a staircase down 20 levels and call it good. Instead, dig one level at a time. And when you get to a level that's got some wet stone, just know, or wet dirt, just know that that level you're going to have to deal with the aquifer on that level. And the easiest way to do that is always build your staircases as you're going down, if you're using stairs, the same size. So if you're just doing a 1x1 staircase, then do a 1x1 staircase all the way down. If you're doing a 2x2, 2x2 all the way down. So let's say it's a 2x2 all the way down. You're going to, when you get to that next level and you put your 4 stairs in, make sure that the, what would that be, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the 12 spaces around that 2x2 that kind of makes another box around it. Also mine out those places. So you'll have 4 squares in the middle, and then you're going to have the 12 squares around it also mined out. So designate that all at the same time. Once your dwarves do all of that, put walls in. And what I would recommend is you start with the 4 corners. Just designate the 4 corners. Let those corners get built. And then once those corners are built, designate the 4 walls in between those corners. Let those get built. Once you do that, you may have gotten some water. It'll kind of get displaced into your stairwell. Just let that water evaporate out. It should only get to a depth of 1 or 2 while your dwarves were doing that mining. Let that evaporate out, and then you're good to go. It'll dry up, and then you start over at the next level and mine down again. It's not hard to deal with. Don't get scared off by that. Anyways, below the aquifer, you see all kinds of stuff that's in the ground. The reason why this is important is for your build. If you don't have iron, and there are places without iron, it means that you're not going to get to steel, because iron needs to be produced by steel by what's there. But you can see iron is all over the place. For this embark, I gave it a metal everywhere, just because I'm going to be doing a lot of tutorial stuff, and I didn't want to have a lack of resources. But it looks like iron's pretty much everywhere. And without steel, you can't get to the most valuable resource for armor and weapons. If you play with less minerals than everywhere, it's going to be a lot harder to find that iron. Also, the flux stone layer, you need flux in order to produce steel as well. You need both the iron and the flux. So if you're embarking someplace that doesn't have both iron and flux, then you're going to have to trade in order to produce it. Okay, so this is not zoomed in yet. If you left click anywhere, it'll zoom into the map. Right click to come back out. So once you think you have an area that you want to go to, you can fine tune your choice by just left clicking. These red blocks are places where somebody else already is. So here's the elves. You can't go on top of that. But once you've looked a little bit deeper and decided you want to go somewhere, you hit this embark and a square will come up at the bottom right, and that shows you exactly where you're going to go. That's important because you'll see some things are a little bit different. So if I mouse over this, I've got this heavily forested that's an untamed wild. Right next to it, I've got just a woodland wilderness. So if I wanted to embark, I could embark where my square covers both of those, and I get the benefits of both. That becomes more important not when it's like woods and more different woods, but if you were to embark somewhere like here, where I've got no trees in this rocky area and heavily forested here, but I like, maybe I like what's in the ground here in the mountains better. It especially happens if you start going with less minerals. Oftentimes these forested areas won't have nearly as much minerals under the ground as rocky areas will. And so having an embark that covers both sections will help give you access to more minerals choices. And you'll want to do something like that. All right, one last thing to show is when you're zoomed out here, you can use this find embark location. to kind of search for stuff for you if you don't want to manually mouse around the map and look for it. So you can set any of these options. If you leave it to NA, it just won't look at that at all. The savagery helps you find in a more peaceful place to live. The XY dimensions is just showing how big of a size it's looking for. The bigger you set that, well, one, it's going to give you, the bigger it is, your frames per second are going to drop quicker by having a bigger site. So you can get better control of your frames per second depth by keeping a smaller site. 4x4 is just the default. Spirit, this is evil biome, normal biome, good biome. This is just helpful with having either good effects or evil. So an evil biome, you can have like evil death fogs and that kind of stuff roll through. With a good place, you can have like blessings come on you and that kind of stuff. So whether you want to play with that. Elevation doesn't matter too much. It's just a high elevation means you're going to get the more mountainous areas, and a low elevation you're going to get more towards the water and that kind of stuff. So it could matter for what types of things show up and what types of minerals show up. The rain is nice because if you have a place that doesn't have water but you have, say, like high rain, you could find ways to collect some. You could have little pools on your map, and those will fill back up with high rain, and so you could still make use of water even if you don't have a river running through. Obviously, temperature I talked about. Drainage just kind of deals with how much the water goes away. So if there's like low drainage, high rain, then that makes the pools show up even more. If you have high drainage and low rain, you're basically not going to get any pooling of water at all. The flux stone layer is just kind of a yes, no, nothing. Same thing with the light and the heavy aquifer and the river. All of those are just yes, no, or nothing. So it's just filtered out. So if you don't want to play with aquifers at all at the start, just make both of these no, and it'll give you sites that don't have aquifers. With the soil, it is multiple selections about it. The clay and the sand, and actually I think the rest of these, the rest of these are all just yes, no, or nothing, or NAs for the rest to decide. And when you've put these in and you hit begin, what it's going to do is it's going to search the whole map for any sites of the size that you said that match everything that you put in here. And you could put a combination that just doesn't exist, especially if your X and Y is big and you've put some tough things to look for. You might not have anything. And if you really want to play that, you're going to have to create an entire new world and hope that it has some sites that match it. Otherwise, you're going to have to kind of, well, I guess I don't need zinc on the map. I don't need nickel. If you put yes to all of these, you might not ever find anything that has all of the minerals. So just get a little bit less specific with what you're looking for, and you'll be able to find some stuff. All right, so I think that's about it for looking at the map and deciding where you want to put something. Thanks for joining.